Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the G Women fundraiser in support of Makya Little for 19th District Delegate of Virginia. I am Mary Worley, a retired FBI Special Agent and Makya's mother. I joined the FBI in 1991 after serving 11 and a half years in the United States Army as a military intelligence officer. I retired in 2011 after 20 years in the FBI, totaling 32 years of federal government service. I currently live in Leesburg, Florida, with my husband of 33 years. Tonight, the G Women fundraiser will showcase 3 distinguished retired G women. Just to give you a little history on where that title comes from, in 1933, gangster Machine Gun Kelly reputedly coined the nickname G-Men for the FBI agents, which stands for government men, as they were all men who represented the government at that time. Women were not allowed to become FBI agents until 1972, following the death of J. Edgar Hoover. And the first African-American female joined the FBI in 1976. Her name was Sylvia Mathis. Now it's time for me to introduce the candidate for this fundraiser. She is the youngest of my 4 children and has always been a fearless leader. Makya always takes the initiative to do what is right when she sees injustice. Makya Little is a first-time candidate running to represent portions of Prince William and Fairfax counties in Virginia's House of Delegates. She is a mother, a former FBI and CIA officer, an equity advocate. In 2019, she fought to reform how African-American history is taught in Virginia as the parent advocate of Governor Northam's Commission on African-American History Education. As president of the TJ Alumni Action Group, she led the administration reform advocacy efforts for the nation's #1 school, which is Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology. Most recently, as a survivor of domestic violence, she authored House Bill 1351, known as Makya's Law, and advocated for the removal of the 1-year waiting period that victims of domestic violence must wait to gain a full divorce in Virginia. As an active 17-year member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, a lifetime member of the Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University Alumni Association, and a certified diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner, Makya seeks to ensure a more inclusive future where shared prosperity is achieved collectively. She is a 26-year resident of Woodbridge, Virginia, a small business owner, a coalition builder who believes that partnerships and creative problem solving are keys to our community's enhanced success. Makya resides with her 3 children and service dog, Sir Phoenix, in Virginia's newly drawn 19th House District. It gives me great pleasure to introduce my daughter and candidate for the 19th District of Virginia, Makya Little.
Thank you so much, pretty lady. I really appreciate the kind introduction. And to everyone who made time to join us today, thank you for being here in support of our campaign. I must say there's nothing like knowing that your mother is willing to step outside of her comfort zone to have your back in such a public way. So thank you so much. Growing up with a mother is a special agent, was different. You know, stepping off the bus and having someone surveil you at the age of 16 is not the idea I had of my high school years. But what it did do was it gave me exposure to an entire family of what I call my FBI aunties and uncles. The Bureau family is like none other. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce three pillars of my childhood that I've looked up to since I was 9 years old when my mother joined the FBI as an agent. I'll start with Miss Cassandra Chandler. And just to highlight how amazing these women are, I'm going to give you just a snippet of their careers in the Bureau. Cassi spent 23 years with the FBI, where she directed white-collar crimes, financial crimes, terrorism, and cybercrime investigations and foreign intelligence activities. She led the FBI's training division, redesigned the Bureau's healthcare fraud and its criminal and domestic terrorism intelligence programs. She was appointed to the U.S. Senior Executive Service as the agency's first Black female special agent to be promoted to the rank of assistant director, and the agency's first female national spokesperson and director of public affairs. She retired as the first female and the first Black special agent in charge of the FBI's field office in Norfolk, Virginia. Rhonda Glover, Dr. Rhonda Glover Reese, a Washington, D.C. native, is the CEO of Rhonda M. Glover Group, LLC, a coaching and mentoring firm focusing on the development of law enforcement leaders and individuals interested in becoming law enforcement professionals. Dr. Reese began her career with the FBI in 1984 at FBI headquarters in the Technical Services Division. In 1988, she became a special agent and was assigned to the Newark Field Division to investigate drug violations. In 2009, Dr. Reese was promoted to Assistant Special Agent in charge of the New Haven Field Office, overseeing the National Security Branch, which was comprised of the counterintelligence, counterterrorism, cyber, and intelligence programs. Last but not least, Dr. Reese is a Diamond Life member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and is the proud military wife of Trent Reese. And Debra Evans Smith. Miss Smith entered on duty with the FBI in 1984, trying to promote you in the support capacity. She was assigned to FBI headquarters for 2.5 years prior to becoming a special agent in 1987. Ms. Smith served in the New Orleans division until 1989, where she attended the State Department's Foreign Service Institute, where she studied and learned Russian. Yeah, I'm gonna let that sit for a minute. In 1998, Ms. Smith was promoted to supervisory special agent and served in the overseas espionage unit at FBI headquarters. In June of 2000, Ms. Smith returned to the Washington field office to supervise an espionage squad. She supervised numerous espionage investigations and recruitment operations, most notably the investigation of former FBI agent Robert P. Hansen. Ms. Smith received numerous awards for her role in this major espionage investigation, for which the movie Breach was written and produced. She went on to serve in many leadership roles, such as Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Chief of the Counter Espionage Group at the CIA as a joint duty assignee, Special Agent Special Assistant of former FBI Director Robert Mueller, and Special Agent in charge of the Washington Field Office, DAD of Counterterrorism Division, Intelligence Division, just numerous roles. And again, she is a proud mother of one son and also my soror, a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. So welcome to our panel. I am really excited about this discussion, so I'm going to jump right in. And we'll start with Cassi. Why did you pursue a career in law enforcement, and specifically federal law enforcement?
Well, I'm going to have to first just start by saying, I'm a soror too. It was all Deltas here. What can I say?
We stacked the deck.
It's unbelievable. But, and I will tell you one of the reasons why I did join the FBI. It's the same reason why I joined Delta Sigma Theta Sorority. They had a focus on social action. I always had a mother who pushed me, I'm sure Mary did the same for you, to help you see inequality and to help fight against injustice. And so my mother had this plan of action. I was going to go to law school and become the next Supreme Court justice. And once I got through law school, I said, I don't want to do this and write motions and whatever the rest of my life. So I had the opportunity to meet with the FBI based upon one of the cases that they had. And my initial thought was I was going to be like James Bond. Honestly, Debra became like James Bond. But I didn't. I went into white collar. But I just had this thought I was going to be James Bonnet, right? I have my little car. But I did pursue going through the FBI because I did believe, just like you did as a kid, and when something wasn't right, when I saw inequality, I was going to fight for it. And I knew that you could never change things standing on the outside. You had to get inside. Getting inside the FBI was going to make that difference. That was the reason.
Wonderful. Debra, you want to take it next?
Debra, you're on mute. Yeah.
That's weird. Okay. My reason for joining the FBI are my reasons, I would say, are different. I always had an interest in criminal justice. So much so that that's all I read. I would say probably from the time I was about 12 or 13 and through college, I read true crime stories until I said, okay, I have to stop this because maybe something is wrong. But I've always been interested in that line of work, but I never ever thought about working for the FBI. It wasn't until a coworker, I was working in Pittsburgh at a cable TV company, and a coworker who I was in conversation with just mentioned, have you ever thought about working for the FBI? She had a sister who worked for the FBI. And I said, no, I'd never thought about it. It absolutely just never crossed my mind. But once she mentioned it, I thought about it and looked into it a little bit. We didn't have the internet back then, but you could read about it. And the other thing that I did, I just picked up the phone and called the Pittsburgh field office and spoke with a recruiter who told me a little bit about the job. And I was very much interested after speaking with her. And I filled out an application. And that's really how it happened, just a short, sweet story. But again, though, like Cassie, I always helped people. Even as a young child, I always wanted to help others, especially other kids who were either bullied or picked on. Even though I was a small person, sometimes I would jump in, walk them home from school, and try to help and take care of other people. So that's something that was always in me. And it still is. That I don't think will ever leave. But as far as the FBI, and I remember my first day at the academy, they asked everybody in the room, all of the new agent trainees, why the FBI? And I was sitting near the back and most everyone said, oh, I've wanted to be an agent since I was 9, since I was a little kid. And I just didn't have that type of story because it just was never presented to me. But I'm thankful to that coworker for presenting it.
Interesting. And Dr. Glover.
You know what? It's an honor and privilege for me to be here amongst greatness. I mean, this is, Cassie and Debbie, they're my mentors. They're the sisters that chin check me, get me straight, tell me when my slip is showing and don't yell it out and all those kind of things. So I'm just honored to be here. But for me, I wanted to be an agent ever since I was a little girl. And that started for me just looking at the FBI with Ephraim Zimbalist Jr.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I knew about the FBI. And so that just kind of stuck with me for years. And then in high school, it was just solidified when I was in a counselor's office and I saw this pamphlet and it said FBI on it. I said, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. And so I was, I never recruited, none of that. It was just, I knew that this is what I wanted to do. I don't know how I knew that there weren't that many women that looked like us in the FBI, but I just knew it. And I knew that I wanted to be one of them to increase that number in some form or fashion. And so that was my entree to the FBI, making an impact, making a change, really being intentional about causing a shift in some form. And so that's what really brought me to the FBI. That was the only thing I wanted to do. I didn't think about doing anything else. And even when I was on the edge of thinking about it, I was always brought back. And that's how I knew that this is what God wanted me to do. This is what he ordered my steps straight to the Bureau, just to connect with all of y'all.
Well, speaking of this connection, like this has always been my norm, right? Like I grew up watching you all. So this is so normalized for me, not so much for the person who has no exposure to the FBI. So as someone who has been on the inside, what surprised you the most regarding the career you experienced versus what you believed you were getting into beforehand? Let's start with Cassi. You're muted.
I'm going to step back just for a second because I want to tell you one other story about joining the FBI, because you talked about police, and it's important because your mother said something. My mother was battered, and I remember fearing our dad and running and hiding in the closet and all of the kinds of things we went through. And someone once told me, when you look at the percentage of women in law enforcement, a large percentage of those women have experienced something in their childhood like that moves them to a point where they feel in their heart they have that desire to protect. And so I think that may also have been one of the reasons, but I never considered the FBI. So when I entered thinking I was going to be, like James Bond, I really didn't have a notion about the Bureau. I was recruited very heavily in the New Orleans office by one of their special agents. I ended up marrying an agent who was the agent that conducted my background investigation. So I became completely entwined in the FBI, completely not knowing what to expect. And then my career just took so many different twists and turns, right? It became, this was the place for me to be, because I could do so many different things, right, guys? You get started, a case is given to you, and there's not the manager, like you have in corporate America over your shoulder telling you, do this. A case is given to you. Use your brain, figure out how to pursue the leads, go after it. And it was exciting to me. I got chances to act a little bit. I didn't work as much in intelligence as Debra did, but every now and then, Debra, you might have remembered in the New Orleans office when they needed someone to go out and do counterintelligence kind of moves, to watch someone's a counterintelligence agent from another country. We were out there because people of color were often not expected to be, right, working in counterintelligence. So we were able to really get in there. And I just learned, I just have to tell you, the FBI for me was fun, exciting. It got me a chance to act. It gave me the opportunity to study the law, to get to put that kind of information forward and to make change. But here's more importantly, can you imagine a Black woman with the power and the authority of the FBI having a badge and carrying a gun? Whoa. So it was very much, it was unique, it was interesting, and the way people reacted was also something I will never forget.
Speaking of the reaction, Debra, I'm gonna ask you a sidebar question, because I just remember you telling the story when you would present about the Robert Hansen investigation. The reaction of the lady where you were knocking on her door and she spoke, you spoke Russian to her. Can you share that story?
Yeah, this was way before the Hansen case. Okay. After I graduated, or after I finished language school, and I was working in Los Angeles, and I was working a program called Immigrate Program, where we were trying to get information from and talk to recent immigrants from Russia, from some of the other republics around Russia. So I would call these individuals on the phone and set up interviews with them. And a lot of them spoke very little English. So I just figured that it would just make it easier if I just spoke Russian to them on the phone. So I would call and speak Russian and set up the entire interview. So this one woman, I set up the interview and then went out to her home, knocked on the door, and she opened the door and she just stared at me. She didn't say anything. She just stared at me, and we were standing there looking at each other. Until I finally said, Strasvicia Minyaza with Debra. Hello, my name is Debra. And she looked at me some more, still didn't say anything. And then she just blurted out, "You're black." And I said, yes. And then she said, and this was all, we were speaking the whole time in Russian. She said, "Was that you on the phone?" And I said, "Yes, it was me on the phone." And then she was just like, "Okay, come in." And then we just did the interview, but it was just that type of reaction. Not everyone was so forward with it. But I could see surprise looks on people's faces when they saw me, and I was the one who spoke with them in Russian. So yeah, it was a surprise. And there was another incident in New Orleans where I knocked on somebody's door. I was brand new, and I put my badge up to it was a peephole, and said, "I'm with the FBI. I have some questions for you." And I heard, "Yeah, right." And no door open. And I'm thinking, yes, I am with the FBI. Here's my badge. And then they finally opened the door and started apologizing. It's, "You don't look like an FBI agent." And they didn't expect to see Black women out there doing this job.
Yep, this is true. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we all probably have stories like that, right, Rhonda? I recalled one time going to interview a vice president of a bank, because I was doing financial crimes, and I was taking a look at this particular executive vice president. And when I walked in the door, he said, "Let me tell you something, little girl, sit down," and gets on the telephone and starts talking to the executive president about this Black woman is in his office. And it was like a big joke. "Let me tell you something, little girl, it's a big joke." And they did not expect that we had the capability or the knowledge or the skills to even conduct an investigation until they were locked up after we provided testimony in the court.
Absolutely. In the interest of time, Rhonda, I'm going to ask you the next question. We've all heard the term "a few bad apples" in law enforcement. Based on your experience, is there anything from a policy or legislative standpoint you believe can prevent these individuals from becoming law enforcement officers in the first place? Or do you believe it's purely cultural conditioning?
What I really believe it is, it's a failure of leadership. It's a failure of leadership in law enforcement. The people that you're seeing that are involved in, this illegal activity, the killing of people that look like us and some people that don't look like us, there was something in them somewhere along the line where it was a nudge to that chief. It was a nudge to someone that was around them that this person should not be in law enforcement. And that starts from training. It really starts at that police academy. And if no one says anything and no one steps up and no one questions what's going on with that particular recruit or with that officer, they're going to continue to do what they're doing, and it gets worse. And we've seen that play out in different scenarios for years. And so for me, I study leadership, I talk about leadership, and it's a failure. It's a failure of leadership. It's a failure of that chief to really step out and really deal with that officer immediately when they've had some sort of misstep, some sort of challenge, they've mishandled people, they've hurt someone. When you see lawsuits coming out of the woodwork on a consistent basis related to that officer, that's a big clue right there. And there were more clues prior to that. So when you start talking about legislating, that I don't think that's a legislative issue. That is a leadership issue. Now, what happens within departments when you start talking about legislating, you talk about funding, you talk about what they're allowed to get, what they're allowed to have. Then you start talking about the funding. when you've heard, this defund the police, which is, for me, I don't agree with that one bit. I agree with looking at resources, reallocating resources, and just causing a shift in that space, and just taking a look at what police departments are doing with their money. Because a lot of times, some of that money should be shifted to training. Some of that funding should be moved to places where there should be some consistent ongoing training for police officers. But I know just from officers that I do know and knowing chiefs, training is just not, it's not a priority. The priority is to protect and serve and just be out on the streets because they're the first line. And so they don't see that they have to carve out that time to ensure that their officers are getting what they need. They're not paying attention to the challenges that some of those officers are having out there. And so I'm glad to see that there are some chiefs across the country that are really starting to pay attention. They're really starting to ensure that their sergeants are trained because that's the first line of supervision. And they're really intentional about that because they're going to be the ones to immediately see some of the challenges of other officers and what they're having and what they really, really need and the kind of things that they need to do to take corrective action.
So leadership creates culture is essentially what you're.
Exactly. If the leader is not stepping up and addressing issues, that leader is allowing it to happen. It's okay. The leader does not see the issue, or they don't believe that it is an issue. And so that if they don't see that there are people getting hurt, they don't see that people are dying, they don't see that people are being mistreated, they don't see that there is injustice, that's a problem. And that's a failure of leadership.
Well, speaking of kind of the defund the police kind of notion, and I'll throw this one to Cassi. Although violence at the hands of law enforcement has disproportionately impacted the Black community, something about the murder of George Floyd hit differently, especially for those of us working in law enforcement. As a member of the leadership team for the FBI African American Millennials, we actually planned a Courageous Conversation series focused on the experiences of Black FBI employees. And I think I saw Tanika in the room, who is also a part of that series. And we even planned one entitled Being Black While Working for Blue to discuss this complicated intersectionality. However, since the murder of George Floyd, very little has improved. And, as we've heard, some legislators have called for defunding the police and others have called for police reform. What would you say is the answer to eliminating police violence?
Gosh, there's quite a few things I'd say, but I'm going to add first and foremost to what Rhonda just said about leadership, and I'm going to add some legal areas that I do believe we can have some federal laws put in place. When we were working towards approving the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, there was a component of that act that would have established a federal registry of misconduct. So if a police officer has misconduct in one city, you know who's doing what. Right. The bad things that they're doing is getting somewhere, and there's a foundation for it. So you always have checks and balances to go back and check on that. Okay, so that act didn't pass. But what that would have provided is a good thing to take a look at in terms of, is this something we do still need? Another thing is, I think the president just recently issued an order on advancing effective, accountable policing and criminal justice practices. And in it, he speaks to having the Department of Justice working more closely with state attorney generals to get that kind of information so that they can start looking at a pattern and a practice of activities within particular law enforcement agencies. Guys, we've got to do this. If we don't, we're all here ladies of intelligence, right? If we don't look at what the intelligence is telling us, we're never going to make effective change. So if the intelligence is telling us this guy's a bad actor constantly, he was a bad actor over here, now he's a bad actor over there. Hey, heads up, he's coming in a lateral move into your police department. You need to know who he is and what his background is telling us. Or if we're not working with a state AG's office and finding out, are you even looking at the pattern and practices of activities at this police department that is letting this stuff slide, like Rhonda said, and not really focusing on it and making effective change or doing the right training, something's wrong with that book department, right?
Right.
So a lot of the stuff that we're looking at, if we don't start looking at the intelligence, pulling it in and seeing who we really are, then we're going to continue to have problems. But I will say this about George Floyd and why it broke my heart so much. There was no excuse for, I thought I saw a gun. There was no excuse for it was dark and in night. This was a complete failure of humanity. One human being treating another human being as if they're not a human being. It's a failure of humanity. That's something you can't teach anyone. I think someone said that earlier. I don't know if it was Debra or Rhonda. It's already in them. So even going beyond leadership, as Rhonda indicated, even going beyond training, it's who you're hiring and bringing into your departments in the first place. Take a look at who they are, who's sitting on your panels and making a decision about who should come in. And they're the same people who have the same backgrounds. And so you never really get any independent thoughts, right? Everybody's thinking and doing and acting the same way. What is that? So we've got to get to a point where we're changing and taking a look at who we're hiring. Are they the right people for this? And then the final thing I would throw out, we've also got to start moving police away from a mentality of being warriors to understanding what it is to be a guardian. I know I hear a lot of people say guardian and protection. I'm just saying one thing, guardians. A guardian knows how to protect, and a guardian doesn't have to be a warrior. A warrior is taught how to kill and face an enemy. The people on the streets, if we think in concepts of humanity, are not people out there to be just shot and killed. That's what a warrior is protecting for, right? They have been taught and trained to protect against the evil enemy. You got to learn how to be a guardian. Parents are guardians. Guardians are in the heart, it's in the mind. So unless we hire people who have that in their hearts and their minds and then train them right, we're never going to change policing in America. All right, I'm get off my soapbox. I was getting ready to go on a roll there, Rhonda.
Well, I appreciate the intelligence.
You need that. This is what this is all about.
Right.
You know, absolutely, kiddo. Let's get our wine and continue this conversation.
Well, Debra, one of the things that you and I both share is, our joint duty experience to CIA. I was there for 3 years learning about another component of the intelligence community. You were there. However, the FBI is the only member of the intelligence community with authorization to arrest those who commit federal crimes. So as a former FBI executive, do you believe that's adequate? And what legislation would you say is needed to help prevent another January 6th, where we had intelligence, to combat the rise of white supremacist violence, where there's plenty of intelligence, and to reduce incidents of mass shootings, all of which are considered domestic terrorism?
And that's a lot. That's a loaded question with a lot in there. But I'll start with the January 6th insurrection, and that's what I call it. I'm not, and I've been trying to think about legislation right now for that, and I'm going to see if my mind can go back to that. But here and now, in dealing with the situation that happened, I think one of the best things that can be done prevention-wise is investigations by the Department of Justice, indictments, arrests, prosecutions, imprisonment. Not only for those who participated in the insurrection, but also for those who orchestrated it. And I mean to the highest level within this government. And that would send a strong message. And if that does not happen, the message will simply be that this is a country that is not serious about our democracy. And the message will also be, try again, and maybe next time you'll succeed. Because we're not serious about stopping you from doing it. So that to me is that's not legislation. That's just what should simply happen based on the facts. And we're seeing a lot of, I've been watching the hearings. I haven't missed a minute of it. So we're seeing a lot of facts being put out there. It's enough. It really is enough for the Department of Justice to look into and go forward. But that's not legislation. That's just how the law should work equally for everyone, from the bottom to the top. And I'll move on to the next, since this is so much of this question. The rise in white supremacist violence. Legislation is lacking when it comes to domestic terrorism, and that really falls under domestic terrorism. For instance, domestic terrorism doesn't have the same authorities as counterterrorism. There's no statute that can be cited when someone's working DT or domestic terrorism, which means that the investigators have to use existing criminal violations in order to move forward with those cases. And that needs to change. As Director Ray, the FBI director, stated previously, that is the highest priority right now for the FBI. So there needs to be statutes to meet that. And it just doesn't exist. There are right now 4 main categories where we see most activity when it comes to domestic violence. The first is racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists, especially those for superiority of the white race or white supremacists. Then there's the anti-government or anti-authority extremists. They also blend in sometimes with the white supremacists. Then there's animal rights and abortion extremists, and those are the numbers there are lower. But those are the 4 areas that are looked at mostly by the FBI when they're working these cases. And then there are specific things that they need that are required for a domestic or a domestic terrorism case. Domestic terrorism case. Violation of a federal criminal law, because there's not one that exists for DT. The activity also has to in part involve force or violence, and it also has to be intended to further political or social goals. And then you have the hate crime also. That's a criminal offense against a person or property even that's motivated by an individual's bias against a race, religion, disability, ethnic, national origin, those types of things. And there's no law against being a racist or even being a part or of one of these groups. There are no laws against that, and because that sort of falls under your First Amendment rights.
Right.
But new legislation needs to be drafted for domestic terrorism. And then the mass shootings. I am probably a little extreme when it comes to this in my thoughts, but it's the way I think. And so I will tell you, the AR-15s and those types of weapons, there's no place for them in the civilian population. They're weapons of war. That's where they belong, and that's the only place they belong. They should be banned. And to those people who say that there are more guns and more weapons in the community in the United States than there are people, fine. Obviously, that's a fact because I hear it over and over again, and I'm sure there are tons of weapons out there. But because that's an issue, that doesn't mean that you sit back and say we can't do anything about it. What about stopping today and not putting more out there and not allowing 18-year-olds to purchase these weapons and making sure that there's a cooling off period for anyone who attempts to purchase, to me, any weapon, any gun, even if it's a pistol, if it's a 5-shot revolver, I think there should be a cooling off period. And I think you need to be 21 years old. 18, 19-year-olds are not. They don't have the maturity level sometimes to handle that. and they shouldn't have the weapons. I mean, in many states, they can't buy beer, but they can buy a gun and kill
Right.
people. It makes no sense, absolutely no sense when you look at it logically. And so there needs to be mandatory background checks for all purchases. And that cooling off period needs to happen. And there are other things, of course, too, that can be implemented. But these weapons of, I'll call them weapons of destruction that are killing, people are using to kill babies and kids. They shouldn't be sold to civilian population at all, period.
Cassie, I see you're off mute. Is there something you'd like to add?
Yeah, because I wanted to throw out, because I heard Debra say this, she mentioned insurrection from January 6th. And I think it's very important for us to recognize and understand insurrection is a form of treason against the United States. When we keep taking a look, going back and forth and acting as if it's okay for people to voice they have the right to say and do, we're not looking at exactly what they did and said that makes them just as much a terrorist as a terrorist who flies into our country from another place. They're doing it inside and it's treason. They're doing it inside and it's insurrection. And how would we punish someone from an international terrorism under those laws? And what do those laws require and how is it outlined? And why do we defer from that differently when we're looking at people within the United States? It doesn't make sense to me. You know, so I just wanted to throw that out when I hear that.
Right.
It's a form of treason, people.
So I think this
You
is
become an enemy of the United States.
right. I think this is a good segue into our last question before we open for Q&A, because I think one of the really stark differences that we as a nation saw was the difference in how law enforcement responded to the marches and protests surrounding George Floyd versus how law enforcement responded to the insurrection. And so although you all have retired from the Bureau, you have yet to retire from public service. As members of the Mirror Project, you've publicly called for more diversity in FBI leadership, and in particular within the special agent ranks. And I'm gonna throw this to all of you. We could start with Rhonda. Why do you feel diversity in the FBI is so important? And what do you believe is the solution for that, especially when headquarters is still named after J. Edgar Hoover?
You know, the FBI has had this challenge for a long, long time. And just be straight talk, no chaser. It's going to be a long, long time before things start to shift. And diversity is important. Diversity is important everywhere. But the problem is that you have people that are not interested in diversity. If you're working against individuals that, you know, they say one thing and they're doing another, that's a problem. If you are in, you know, you're sitting at the table and you're having conversations and plans are being generated and generated and created and programs are developed, but yet there is no, you know, no one is standing up for those programs and the leadership is not pushing those programs, then it's a waste of time. You know, I have seen so many people that have stepped into roles, diversity, inclusion, and equity, diversity, D&I roles throughout the country. And their leadership is not interested in really making change, because those same people that join these organizations are the ones that are leaving in droves.
Right.
Because they get there, they don't have the support, they don't know where to turn. The leader of the organization is just really not interested. It's all window dressing. And so unfortunately, even though, you know, we are really being intentional and we're really holding the Bureau's feet to the fire about diversity and bringing in numbers and really basically doing the right thing, because it's important to have diversity of thought. But if you don't want to have diversity of thought, you're not going to make that shift and make it happen. If you don't want anyone in the room that looks different than you or thinks differently than you do, then no, it's not going to happen. And so you do have to come up with policies and procedures and steps that are really going to make them do those things and help them understand this is why you need to do it. Now, you may not change their heart, but you could change the way that they do things, and you're going to watch them, and you're going to watch them like a hawk. And you bring the Department of Justice, involve the Department of Justice. You involve the people on the Hill. You involve the Senate. You involve the Congress. You involve everybody that is going to have a say in whether the Bureau is going to get money. We're going to involve everyone that has the say as to whether the Bureau is going to get the resources that they need in order to do what they need to do. Because what they do need is diversity. They need diversity of thought. They need people sitting at the table that look different from the person that they're looking at from across the table. And they have to have diversity of leadership. Now, there has been a shift of leaders in the Bureau. You know, I'm seeing people look like us that are moving up, but that's fine. But you still have work to do, because it's been a long time coming. I remember when I was coming up and I saw leadership. I saw Debra, I saw Cassi, I saw Jennifer, I saw Mai, I saw so many sisters, and I saw that I could do that. I could do that. But they had to go on. They had to move on. They had to continue. They couldn't just stay there forever. They could not stay there forever for me. They couldn't stay there forever for others. They had to move on. And unfortunately, there was a large gap. There was a gap of succession, unfortunately. And so now it is still, as far as I'm concerned, there's still a gap. When I take a look at the sisters that are there and the brothers that are there, and I see where they are and the positions that they're holding, and they should be moving. But there's that brick wall. There's that brick wall. We're going to give them that 14. But when you start talking about becoming an ASAC and you start talking about getting into the senior executive service, that's a whole nother conversation right there. That's a whole nother conversation that you have to do a whole nother Zoom to have a conversation about that. But the key thing, it is important. But I'm on that leadership kick, because if the leader up top, if he or she doesn't want it, and if they don't support it, it's not going to happen. And we're going to keep going. Mira, we're going to push on the gas, because we know that there are so many people out there that are hurting. There are so many people that they don't have a voice. And so we're going to be their voice, and we're going to do our best to cause a shift, to cause a change in the way that the Bureau, how they recruit, how they bring in, how they hire. And we're going to keep our foot on the gas and hold their feet to the fire as it relates to diversity in the FBI.
One of the things that, I resigned in January, and it was really hard to watch my colleagues struggle to try to find their fit in the organization. And I think seeing the numbers in leadership dwindle was discouraging to a lot of employees. So as far as DE&I, what would you say to current Black employees who, like Cassi, feel like the way to change is from the inside, yet feel discouraged and trying to advance their careers. And it seems as though the leadership is not kind of walking the walk as far as they're about the prioritization in the Bureau. Cassie?
You broke up just there towards the end, but let me just say a couple of things. The business that I run is called Vigeo Alliance. And what I do is I go in and I conduct culture risk assessments for businesses and companies and organizations. And I take a look at their diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and how people feel there's a part of belonging within the culture, right? I do this with police departments.
Right.
Consistently, it's the same problem. There's no real plan for people of color within an organization or a business. They're just checking a box because someone has told them this is what you do. So we did a recruiting program in the FBI. Now we've got so many people. Let's think for one moment, if I am 13.4% of the American population, shouldn't I be 13.4% of the Federal Bureau of Investigation that's protecting the American population? What's wrong with that picture? If I'm entering into an organization, shouldn't I have a career development plan that ensures I get to a field office, and after the field office, I move up into a supervisor to the next role, and on and on and on? Why are there no plans? Every business is doing this now. Rhonda mentioned succession planning. Why is this not being done in the FBI? And we have a federal government that can ensure that we have programs and policies within place and practices across the board in the government. So this doesn't happen. What's happening right now, I heard Rhonda say, we've got people of color moving into some top positions. Here's the story. That's going to end in a couple of years, and then they're going to go into a void all over again because there's nothing planned that's sustainable. It's just check the box, move someone in and move them along. We've got to be a lot more forceful about the way we do and say things. People of color, my dear sisters in the FBI, you still have a voice. Don't feel you have to hide in a corner and not speak up. One of the things that changed with our group of people was we spoke up, did we not, Deb? I mean, there were a lot of, we had to bring action in the court. We had to do a lot of different things to keep things moving. When there was at one time, Rhonda, I don't know if you can recall it, but there was one time when Black women did not get through the FBI Academy for about 3 or 4 years. We got together, drafted our own report, and brought it to Director Mueller and said, this has got to stop. And then things changed. So unless we get to a point where we speak up, stop waiting for someone to speak for you, stop waiting for someone to fight for you, stand up and speak for yourself, and others will come and support you. We're not going to let you just do that alone. We're here. We'll come back and we'll push those doors. I'm fully retired. I've got a business, so I can come and go wherever I want and do and say whatever I want, and no one has to hold my feet to the fire. I hold myself, right? So you get in there and you take a stand. We will back you up. We will support you.
And I will never forget the 100-year anniversary of the first African-American to join the FBI, when you literally got on stage, grabbed the microphone and said, 4 what? Oh no, we gotta fix this. And
it's ridiculous.
I was in the audience like,
and we're gonna keep pushing this, right? The Mirror Project is just one part. We have our voices going into DOJ. We have voices going into members of Congress. We've got to keep pushing the issue. And it's not just an FBI problem, guys. It's across the federal government and it's across everywhere else. Why is it I'm 13.4% of the population and I cannot be a part 13.4% to protect that population? Why is that? It doesn't make sense. It's illogical. Let's take it, let's bring it all the way over to the folks over in Star Trek. This is illogical.
Absolutely. Well, we are getting at time. Thank you, audience members, for your questions that you've added. I just want to do one last round robin kind of sort of final closing thoughts from each of you. I cannot thank you enough for your, not just your public support, but your private support for me on a personal level throughout my career. the talks that I needed, the shoulders I needed to cry on. Just thank you for being the examples of leaders that I needed to see as a little girl. Debra, you want to start with closing remarks?
Hey, you were breaking up a little bit, but I think you called on me to start off the closing. Well, I would like to start by thanking you. Thank you for what you are doing. It's not an easy thing to leave a position, leave a job, and move into something else. I've known you for quite some time, Makya, and you are talented in many ways. And I remember, I don't know if I said this to you, but I remember saying it to someone that you would make a great politician. and I really did say that. And I've thought that since I've known you. So I think that you are doing something that is inside of you and that you're going to be great at. I wish you all the best in what you're doing. Happy, I'm thrilled to be here to support you. Keep going with this. Even in life, and we know in the FBI, right? The first time you may not get what you want, just keep on pushing and going at it. And I'm sure you'll get there. But I'm proud to see you do what you're doing. I really am. So it's like seeing it's almost like seeing a daughter grow up and bloom. And that's what you're doing right now. So I really want to say thank you for what you're doing. And yeah, I think Rhonda and Cassi said so much to those who are still in the FBI. There will be times when things may seem bleak to you. You really have to get a good support system. That's what I had when I was in there. Cassi, you were one of those people. And it started from the people who were with me in my very first office, with you, Cassi, with Jennifer Love, with and it just went throughout my career. But then you meet new people like Rhonda, and different people bring different things to the table, different thoughts, and so many different things to push people along and to lift you up. And that's what we have to continue to do, even when things are not going well. And there have been people who've come to me, other agents who've come to me and said that they're ready to leave the FBI because they've tried so many times to promote and they haven't been able to promote. So they feel that they've gone as far as they can go. And some have just said, I'm going to do my time and retire and be done with it. And even people who are looked over for positions that they applied for, and then someone comes back to them and says, I want you to train the person who got this job. And I know more than one instance where that occurred. And I think that's an awful thing, an awful position to be in. And you don't want to say yes, because if you want me to train them, then why didn't I get the position? Things like that. And it happens over and over again. But I would just say, stay strong, stay in the fight. Keep pushing for what you want to do. Don't let anyone tell you no, and keep on going and stay positive. That helps a lot. So those are my final words.
Rhonda?
I'm very, very proud of you. And you have demonstrated intense courage. You have created a shift. And I am very, very proud of you. I look forward to you stepping into your new role. And I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to go to this website and I'm going to see how much more I can give, because you need to be in that spot. You are helping so many people with your legislation, you positioning yourself to make change, and in turning your pain into purpose and not sitting back. You've taken what has happened in your life and you are causing a shift in the lives of others. That is a big deal. And I'm going to continue to support you as much as I can to make sure you get to that role, because people need you. There are people that they don't know how to use their voice. And because they don't know how to use their voice, they need people like you to speak for them, to step in the gap, bridge the gap, and help. Because I know we all know our strengths and our weaknesses. And I can tell you, you have demonstrated so much courage. I'm so proud of you. And I feel myself, I'm getting really emotional about it, because you don't have a lot of people to do what you're doing. And you're saving lives. Do you realize that? In what you're doing, you're saving the lives of women throughout the state of Virginia. And because of what you're doing, you're going to go higher. You're going to go throughout the state, throughout the country. You just keep going. Don't you stop. It will get difficult. It will get hard. But you have a village. You have a village of women. You have a village of men that will wrap their arms around you to lift you up when you feel like you're about to go down, and to remind you that we've got you, because you've been appointed to do this. You were prepared for this time right now. And so you go and you continue to do your work. And I'm going to do my best to help you do that. I'm in Florida now. I can't vote in Virginia, but I can write a check. I can write a check. I can go to website.
And thank you. And I just gotta say, and I've told you this privately, but there was a really dark day where I really questioned, am I doing what God's calling me to do? And maybe I misheard, or maybe, and your first donation came through, and all I could do was say, my God, okay. It was like he sent you. So thank you for your support, all of it, the public and the private. And so Chandler, we will close it out with you.
There's a new television show. It's a series called Roar, R-O-A-R, and it's based upon the Helen Reddy song, I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar. If you get a chance to see it, please do. The very first episode is called The Woman Who Disappeared. And of course, it's a Black woman. One of the things that I'm not going to tell you, Makya, how proud I am of it. No, you know this. I'm going to talk to all my sisters who are out there right now. You want to talk about taking a stand? Here's a place to take a stand. We've got a sister with a voice. She did so many incredible things within the FBI, and she used to call me sometimes frustrated or send me a text with her frustrations. And we tried to, you got to walk in it. But she was always taking action on behalf of everyone else. Now it is time for us to take action to ensure she keeps moving towards the goal of making sure we are not the disappearing woman. And we can do this when we come together. The last thing I would say to everyone is when people of color, particularly Black women and Black men, rise to top levels in the FBI and other places, they have a mandatory requirement that they do for other people of color. So if Black folks are moving to the top, they should be looking around, and you should never have a problem. I saw the text that came in on the chat. You should never have a problem that you can't even become a field supervisor. Voices are in there. What are our Black voices doing? When you move along, I had the opportunity once in my bureau career to sit on a career board to make a decision on who was going to become the next as special agents in charge of 2 field offices. 2 Black women got that position. Do you recall that? Mai and Debbie. I sat on that board and I pushed for them. And no matter what anyone else said about them, you could not outspeak this voice because I knew them. And no one could say all their background and skills as I did. So now we've got a sister who is moving into a position that she can do a whole lot more for us, know her background, know her skills, speak her voice, be her eyes, be her everything out there, because you're out there right now. She's supported you before. Now let's give her the support that she needs. That's my ending comment.
Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you to everyone for attending tonight's virtual fundraiser, especially my host committee members. You all have had the opportunity to meet some of my bureau aunties, but my bureau uncles absolutely held me down as host committee members. So I'd like to publicly acknowledge the following retired special agents and executives: Eddie Alford, Edward Dixon, Gerald Jackson II, Greg Jones, Kenneth Moore, and Sean Taylor. Also, just thanks to my special guests, Rhonda, Dr. Rhonda Glover, Reese, Debra Evans Smith, and Cassandra Chandler. Thanks to their combined support, we've raised nearly $1,000, but still have a long way to go to reach our goal of $3,000 this evening. As a Bureau employee previously subjected to the Hatch Act, I had no idea why candidates were always asking for donations. And I've since learned that it takes every dollar to show the viability of a campaign, to connect and communicate with voters, and to secure a seat at the table to represent those with similar values in legislative spaces. So here I am now, as a candidate myself, asking for your support and help in getting us there. Literally every amount helps. And if you can make your donation reoccurring at the $5, $10, $50 level, even better. Your sustained support and co-investment in this campaign are what's needed to help move our community forward. Thank you again for your attendance and support this evening. May God bless you, our Commonwealth, and the United States of America.